My wife lied about being pregnant while I paid off her student loan, so I left her life silent and watched everything collapse. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally built the kind of life people dream about. A steady career, a cozy home in the suburbs, and a wife who seemed to love me in every way that mattered. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. Proud of every overtime shift, every sacrifice that built the life Megan and I shared. We weren't extravagant, but there was comfort in our routine. Sunday mornings with pancakes, laughter echoing through the kitchen. Her soft thank you every time I handed her coffee. Megan was everything I thought I needed. Warm, witty, and supportive. When we met, she was still recovering from financial stress, buried under student loans she could barely manage. I remember telling her, "We'll handle it together," and meaning it. I wanted to be her stability, the person she could count on when everything else felt uncertain. There was something fulfilling about watching her relax, her shoulders slowly losing that tension she used to carry everywhere. I paid off little by little, one loan, then another, each payment feeling like a step toward our shared future. Every night, I'd look at her reading on the couch, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp, and I'd feel lucky. For the first time in my life, I believed I was exactly where I was meant to be. My parents used to say, marriage is about teamwork, and I held on to that. We were a team. At least that's what I thought. Then one evening, Megan walked into the living room, her eyes glistening, her hands trembling slightly. "I think I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words hit me like a wave, fear, joy, disbelief all at once. I laughed, then hugged her, already picturing a tiny heartbeat, a nursery, a future. I had no idea. That moment would mark the beginning of everything unraveling. When Megan told me she was pregnant, something inside me shifted. I'd always imagined becoming a father someday, but hearing it from her lips made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining holding a tiny baby in my arms. Hearing that first cry, seeing Megan's smile in the hospital bed, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with preparing for fatherhood. I started cooking healthier meals, researching baby gear, and secretly calculating how much I could save if I cut back on eating out or buying coffee. Megan teased me for being too serious, but I could tell she loved the attention. She'd press my hand to her stomach and say, "You're going to be the best dad," and I'd believe her every time. Money was tight, but I didn't care. I started paying larger chunks of her remaining student debt, thinking, we're about to be a family. No point in letting this hang over us. I even picked up extra hours at work, telling myself it was for the baby. Every late night felt worth it. But little things started to feel off. Megan suddenly became secretive about doctor visits, saying she didn't want me to stress or miss work. When I offered to take her myself, she'd smile and say, "Next time. I promise." She talked about morning sickness, yet I never saw her actually sick. She skipped meals, but later I'd hear the fridge door open quietly at midnight. I told myself I was overthinking, that pregnancy made women act differently, that love meant trust. But deep down, there was a whisper, a quiet, uneasy voice asking, what if something isn't right? The weeks that followed became a blur of responsibility. I threw myself deeper into work, chasing every overtime shift I could. The idea of our baby gave me a purpose I'd never felt before. I'd come home exhausted, smelling of coffee and printer ink. But the thought of Megan resting upstairs with a growing life inside made every ache worth it. She'd meet me at the door with a tired smile, saying things like, "You're working too hard," and I'd joke, "I'm just getting practice for fatherhood." We laughed. But sometimes I noticed how distant her eyes seemed, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I brushed it off, telling myself every pregnancy came with mood swings. Money disappeared faster than I expected. Between bills, groceries, and paying off the last of her student loans, my savings started to thin out. Megan insisted I didn't have to do that she could handle it, but I wanted her to feel secure before the baby came. "We're in this together," I told her one night. She nodded and kissed me, whispering, "You're too good to me." But then, small things didn't add up. The unopened prenatal vitamins sitting untouched on the counter. The appointment reminders she swore were rescheduled. The ultrasound photos she claimed to have forgotten at the clinic. I'd catch glimpses of her messaging someone late at night, turning her phone face down when I walked by. Still, I refused to doubt her. She's stressed. You're just tired, I told myself. Love meant trust. And I prided myself on being the kind of husband who didn't accuse without proof. Yet every time I looked at her, something heavy pressed against my chest, an invisible weight of unease. And one night, when I reached for her hand and she flinched away, that weight became impossible to ignore. It started with excuses. Megan began canceling plans last minute, claiming she was too tired or not feeling well. I tried to be patient. Pregnancy was unpredictable, I told myself. But something in her voice, the sharpness, the way she avoided eye contact, felt unfamiliar. The warmth we once had was cooling into something distant and cold. One night, I came home early from work, holding her favorite takeout and flowers. The house was dark. No sound, no car in the driveway. I checked my phone, no message. Hours later, she walked in wearing a casual smile, saying she'd gone on a walk to clear her head. I tried to believe her, but the smell of perfume that wasn't hers lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. Over dinner, I mentioned how much I wanted to be involved, that I wanted to come to her next doctor's appointment, hear the heartbeat, maybe even see the ultrasound myself. Her fork froze midair. They don't allow partners yet, she said quickly, before adding new policy. It didn't sound right, but I nodded anyway. I didn't want to start a fight a few days later. A mutual friend mentioned seeing Megan at a downtown bar, laughing, holding a drink, no visible baby bump. I laughed it off, saying she must have been drinking soda, but the image stuck in my mind like a splinter. That night I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, my heart pounding with questions I couldn't ask. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking like some insecure husband. But doubt has a sound, a quiet, steady hum that never stops once it begins. And by then, that sound was all I could hear. The tension between us had become something I could feel in the air, thick, silent, heavy. Megan avoided me more often now, claiming she was exhausted or emotional. I wanted to believe it was just the pregnancy, that I was imagining everything. But deep down, something had shifted. The laughter that used to fill our home had been replaced by cautious small talk and the hum of distant silence. One morning, while Megan was in the shower, I stared at her phone on the counter. I'd never snooped in my life, but curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. I scrolled through her calendar. No appointments. No doctor visits. Just blank weeks where she claimed to be at checkups. My heart started racing. I picked up the phone and called the clinic she'd mentioned months ago. "Hi. I'm just confirming an appointment for my wife, Megan Porter," I said. The receptionist paused. "Sir, we don't have anyone by that name in our system." I froze. My throat went dry. "Are you sure?" I whispered. "Yes," she replied gently. "Maybe she goes to another branch." I hung up before she could say more. My hands were trembling. That night, I confronted Megan. "Why didn't the clinic have your name?" Her face went pale, and for a second, just a second, I saw panic flash across her eyes. Then tears. She broke down, sobbing, saying she had lost the baby early, but hadn't told me because she didn't want me to be sad. My chest caved in. I hugged her as she cried into my shoulder, whispering, "I'm so sorry." I just couldn't face it. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. The grief felt real, the kind that cut deep. But as I held her, something inside whispered a truth I didn't want to face. Her tears didn't feel like guilt. They felt like performance. After that night, something in me broke, not in anger, but in silence. I told Megan I needed time to process our loss, and she nodded, relieved that I wasn't asking more questions. On the surface, I acted calm, the devoted husband, comforting his grieving wife. But inside, something had shifted. My love for her had turned into a cold curiosity. I started noticing the little things she didn't realize I was seeing. her phone that never left her side, the faint smirk she gave when checking her messages, her sudden habit of deleting every notification before I could glimpse the screen. I stopped confronting her. Instead, I began observing, cataloging, recording. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I quietly unlocked her phone using the fingerprint she'd once trusted me with. The messages I found turned my stomach. A thread with her best friend, joking about how pretending to be pregnant worked better than expected. Another saying, "Once the loans are gone, I'll figure out how to leave without drama." My vision blurred. I sat there staring at the screen, reading those words over and over. Every sacrifice, every long night I'd worked, every moment I'd spent imagining a future, all of it had been a setup. I didn't confront her. Not this time. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my email, and locked her phone again. The next morning, I made her breakfast, kissed her forehead, and told her I was taking on extra work. She smiled and said, "You're the best husband ever." That was the moment I decided she would never see my anger, my pain, or my revenge coming. I was going to disappear from her life without a single warning once I made the decision to leave. Everything became strangely peaceful, like the eye of a storm. I smiled more, cracked jokes, asked Megan about her day. I made her feel safe again. She had no idea that every gesture, every kiss, was part of my quiet exit. I wasn't the naive man she thought I was anymore. I was the ghost she'd soon realize she'd created herself. Started moving money into a private account under the guise of new investments. I stopped paying her bills and redirected our joint payments into my name only. At work, I requested remote transfer opportunities, telling colleagues I wanted a change of scenery. Every step was deliberate, every move invisible at night. While she scrolled through her phone, probably texting the same friend she'd bragged to, I pretended to be asleep. I'd already moved my important documents to a storage locker and started transferring photos, passwords, and evidence to a hidden drive. When she asked why I was so calm lately, I smiled and said, "I'm just grateful we're okay now." She believed me completely. In her mind, she'd manipulated me into submission, the perfect husband who couldn't live without her. But the truth was, I was already gone. The man who once adored her had turned into a quiet shadow. Watching her from the corner of his own life, the day I signed the new lease in another city, I remember standing in the empty apartment, the echo of my footsteps filling the space. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. Back home, Megan was still laughing at her phone, sipping wine, oblivious. She had no idea that every piece of her illusion was about to vanish quietly, completely and without mercy. The morning I left, everything was calm. It's calm. The sun crept through the blinds, dust motes floating in the golden light. And for a moment I just stood there, watching the woman who'd lied to me sleep peacefully in our bed. I felt nothing. No hate, no rage, not even sadness. Just finality. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. My bags were already packed in the car, my documents secured, and my phone wiped clean of any trace she could use to find me. On the kitchen table, I left a single note. I know everything. No explanation, no argument. Just the truth, cold and simple. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of every sacrifice lift off my shoulders. The house that once felt like home now looked like a stage set, fake hollow, built on lies. I drove for hours, the city shrinking in my rearview mirror, until the roads turned unfamiliar and quiet. When I finally stopped, turned off my phone, and deleted every trace of her from my contacts. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No more lies. No more pretending. Just silence. The next day, my inbox started flooding with messages from mutual friends, from family. "Megan's panicking. She says you vanished. What happened?" I ignored them all. I wasn't cruel. I just didn't know her a single word anymore. Through whispers from people back home, I heard how she spun the story, painting herself as the abandoned wife, the victim of my emotional distance. But gossip has a way of unraveling lies faster than truth ever could. And while she scrambled to maintain her image, I watched quietly from miles away, waiting for her perfect world to start crumbling piece by piece. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Within weeks of my disappearance, Megan's picture-perfect world started to fracture in ways she couldn't control. At first, she played the victim, crying to friends, posting vague quotes about betrayal and healing. People pitied her. But sympathy fades quickly when the truth starts to surface. One of her friends, the same one she'd bragged to in those messages, leaked screenshots after realizing how deep her manipulation ran. The story spread fast. How Megan had faked a pregnancy, used her husband for money, and lied about everything. Suddenly, the same people who had once admired her started turning away. Her job found out too. She'd been using company time and resources for personal errands, and with the scandal spreading, they quietly terminated her contract. Then came the debt collectors. The loans she thought I'd pay off completely? I had stopped the final transfers before I left. Calls, letters, threats, they all started pouring in. I didn't take pleasure in it. Not exactly. But I won't lie. Part of me felt justice in motion. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she was living alone, struggling to keep up rent, avoiding calls from her parents out of shame. She tried reaching out through old emails, writing things like, "Please, can we just talk?" And you misunderstood everything. I didn't respond, but silence, I learned, can be louder than words. For the first time, she was forced to face the consequences of her lies without someone to save her. And yet, watching from afar, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty still. That emptiness didn't mean forgiveness. Not yet. Because I knew the real reckoning, the one that would end her web of lies completely, hadn't even begun. Months passed in quiet satisfaction. I had rebuilt a small, simple life in a new city, new job, new apartment, no ghosts in the corners. Every once in a while, I'd hear whispers from home about Megan trying to reinvent herself online. She'd post filtered photos, long captions about growth and self-love, pretending she'd risen from heartbreak. I might have ignored a tiff she hadn't started twisting the story again. Someone sent me a link to her post. Megan was claiming I'd abandoned her after she miscarried. She painted me as a cold, heartless man who couldn't handle grief. The comments were full of sympathy, strangers calling her strong and resilient. For a moment, I felt the old anger flare up. But instead of reacting impulsively, I opened that secret folder I'd built months ago. The screenshots, the texts, the proof. I sent them quietly to a few mutual friends, the same ones commenting under her lies. "Just so you know the full story," I wrote. Nothing more. Within days, the truth spread like wildfire. The texts she'd joked about faking a pregnancy. The messages mocking me for being easy to control. It's the receipts of the debts I paid. Her online image collapsed overnight. People she'd deceived publicly called her out. Employers saw it. Friends unfollowed her. Even her family, who once defended her blindly, turned cold. I didn't need to say a word. The truth did all the talking. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat by my window one evening, watching the city lights flicker below. Thought about how silence had done what shouting never could. Megan had tried to build her life on lies. Now, all that was left was the wreckage and the echo of her own deceit closing in on her. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done teaching her lessons yet. Almost a year had passed since I walked out of that house. And by then, Megan was nothing more than a memory I'd filed away. I'd built a new rhythm: morning coffee, runs before work, quiet nights without tension. But one afternoon, an old coworker texted me, "You might want to see this." It was a local news article. My heart stopped when I saw her face. Megan Porter arrested for fraud and identity falsification. I read every line, disbelief fading into grim understanding. She'd been caught running the same scam, convincing another man she was pregnant, manipulating him into covering her debts. Only this time, the guy caught on early, went to the police, and handed over everything. The evidence was overwhelming. She'd used fake documents, forged medical records, even photoshopped an ultrasound. It hit me like a strange mix of justice and sadness. Not because I missed her, but because I realized just how deep her deceit ran. She hadn't learned anything, she'd just moved on to her next victim. And now, she was facing real consequences. Possible jail time, public humiliation, the collapse of what little reputation she'd tried to rebuild. Friends who once pitied her were now disgusted. Her own family distanced themselves, refusing to post bail. She was alone, truly, this time. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city humming below, and thought about the person I'd been when this all started, the man who believed love could fix anything, who mistook manipulation for devotion. That version of me was gone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free still. As I scrolled through the article one last time, my eyes caught the final line. Sources say her ex-husband declined to comment. And for the first time, that silence felt like the most powerful statement I could ever make when I finally closed that chapter of my life. It wasn't with fireworks or revenge, it was with peace. I'd spent so long drowning in betrayal that quiet felt foreign at first. But over time, I started to breathe again. My mornings didn't start with anxiety. My nights didn't end with suspicion. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt clean. Like fresh air after a storm, I rented a small house near the coast. Started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My friends joked that I'd gone off the grid, but the truth was, I just needed to exist without being someone's emotional crutch. Therapy helped too. It didn't erase what happened, but it taught me something invaluable. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Sometimes it just means letting yourself move forward. I thought about Megan less and less as the months passed. Not with hate, not even with pity, just distance. I realized she'd been an illusion I wanted to believe in, a reflection of the kind of love I thought I deserved. But the man I was now knew better. I didn't crave revenge anymore because I'd already won by surviving. By healing, by refusing to let her story define mine. One evening, standing by the water, I caught my reflection rippling against the surface and whispered, "You made it." It wasn't triumph, it was relief. The kind that seeps deep into your bones after you've carried something too heavy for too long. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's indifference. It's living so far beyond their reach that your silence becomes the loudest sound they'll ever hear, and that's exactly what I chose: to disappear, to rebuild, and to let her face the ruins she built all on her own.